You are watching the maiden voyage of the LF Energy webinar series. I want to welcome all of you and also ask for your patience as we maybe undo some of the kinks. I did want to just say hi to you in person so that you see that there's a real live human being in my real live home office. And that this is incredibly exciting for us. The last month has been incredibly busy, and now we are launching a webinar series. The first one is just an overview, and then the next 6 will cover all of the projects that are being hosted within LF Energy. So thank you very much for using your time. I'm gonna put myself back on stop video so that we can just pay attention to what's on the slides. And for those of you who are calling in, I'll do my best to try and describe a little bit what's on the slides and make sure that we have plenty of time to have questions. If you have something that comes up in the middle, please raise your hand, and Jeffro, who is on, is kind of the other person online with me, is the program manager. Jeffro, do you want to just take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeffro, obviously. I am program manager for the project. I work for the Linux Foundation, and I have access to the chat as well as to the Q&A portion. You'll probably notice if on the screen there's a little Q&A button. If you have an open question that you'd like to ask but not interrupt the recording, you can go ahead and ask it there, and I will make sure to answer it or pass it on to Shuli when the appropriate time comes. And Great. You can reach me through the chat if you need to.
Okay. So let's see. The maiden voyage. So here we go. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Europe at a conference, the Encrypt conference, which is for all of the TSOs and the DSOs in Europe. I'm not sure how many of you are from Europe or how many of you are from the United States, but it'll be posted, and I'm sure that folks from all over the world maybe will have an opportunity to listen in. And so just to set the context, this is a picture of Greta Thunderbird, and Greta is a 16-year-old young woman from Sweden, and about 3 or 4 years ago, she got very ill, kind of realizing what was happening with the planet and her difficulty in being able to understand how it was that we, the adults, were letting climate change happen. And she developed something called selective mutism, which meant that she only speaks when she has something really important to say. And I listened 4 times to the TED Talk that she did, because I really wanted to embody and understand what it was that she is saying and what it is that she sees from how she looks at the world. What I understood, and this is a picture of my grandson about 15 minutes after he was born, 20 minutes after he was born. And what I understood is that we are, those of us who are working in power systems, we are the ones that they are waiting for, because we truly do have the capacity to transform the electrical systems, to enable electric vehicles, to be able to fundamentally shift from a centralized fossil fuel environment to a decentralized kind of internet of energy. And what I recognized is that these guys, these ones who are coming up, and these are more of them, these are the eyes of children. They are, one person said, oh, these are our future customers. And that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that on some level, they are our judge and jury. And they are the ones who are looking at us and asking us to fundamentally transform our economies, to transform our energy systems, and to create the conditions for them to have a life that, in which we don't hand them in 50 years from now the conditions that will remain unstable for thousands of years. And so I start my talks in asking us to remember them and to consider them, so that when we begin to make the decisions that we need to make going forward, that we really think about what side of history we want to stand on. Because I think that there are hard choices that we need to make, and there is a lot of noise in the system that makes it difficult to know which way to steer. But each and every one of us is going to have to decide where we stand and what is our relationship to the conditions on the planet. So I believe fundamentally that the power systems folks are the people who can fix this problem. 94% of the emissions and decarbonization can occur through transformation of the grid. And so what I'd like to do is to take you on a path which I believe is fundamentally hopeful, because it is showing us where there is a leverage point and how that leverage point, you can join us in this leverage point of transforming energy. And that I also want to be able to show how the Linux Foundation and open source is a place for us to step onto in terms of a path that has been cut by many before us, so that we can speed the innovation of transforming the grid. And I think there are three things that I talk about in kind of as a mantra, which is faster, cheaper, more secure. And what I'd like to believe, and hold me to it, and let's keep talking about it, that in this talk, I can show you how this particular path is cheaper, faster, and more secure. So this is a picture of the internet. If you were to imagine where we're going, in many ways what we're doing is transforming the grid so that it looks like that. When I was working on my PhD, which was, I asked the question, how does the future emerge during times of collapse? One of my root scholars is a man named Ilya Prigogine, and he was a chemist who won a Nobel, was offered him a Nobel for his, in physics, in dissipative systems. And late in his career, he was asked, do you believe in a kind of universal theory of everything? And what he said is, I don't know if there's one unified theory for the universe, but what I do know is that the laws of the universe evolved over billions of years, and they built on top of each other, and that they cannot contradict each other. And that what we are fundamentally facing is determining how to, and then executing on how to align our laws of our economic systems and how we are in relationship to the laws of the universe, so that we are not in contradiction. And carbon as a byproduct of digging up fossils for fossil fuels is in fact an indication of a contradiction of the laws of nature. The US, second to China, is the second greatest global polluter of greenhouse gases. However, we are no longer being governed by the wisdom of science. In fact, most recent news is that we are, in fact, doing everything we can to shut down the wisdom of science. I'm deeply grateful to the to the European Union, because as challenging as things may be, they are at least acting in the world's best interests in terms of aligning their public policies and their markets, and that is in fact driving change. And at the foundation of that change is the recognition of the need to collaborate. The reason why I am showing this picture of the internet is because we need to leverage the same design principles that we use to scale the internet in terms of designing the energy systems of the future. One of the examples that I give when I talk to people is thinking back on not that long ago, if you were to make a long distance call to, you know, an overseas call or a call to Asia or a call to Europe, from the United States or from anywhere in the world, they were very brief calls, and at the end, maybe it cost you $10. Now, you could, if you wanted to, have a webcam on the streets of any city in the world, and it would be essentially free. That is the nature of the level of change we need to actually facilitate and enable with regards to energy. And so we have some great examples that are proof of concepts in which you have countries that are decarbonizing. But in many senses, they are able to do that because they are very wealthy countries. And we have to decarbonize at a planetary level, which means we have to shift the economics of energy to the point that we can enable and facilitate decarbonization globally. What LF Energy is about leveraging the world's largest shared technology investment. So before I talk more about LF Energy, I do want to talk about the Lennox Foundation, because I think it's one of the most interesting and powerful examples of collaboration on the planet. The Linux kernel has absolutely grown into the foundation or the infrastructure plumbing of the modern digital world. It is at the foundation of everything. That occurred from a dorm room in Finland 26 years later to running the planet. The Linux Foundation was created as the home for the kernel. And the reason why is that the world was basing its decisions and its strategies, companies, on the infrastructure and the requirements of the kernel, and that it needed to actually be protected and to live somewhere where it could exist in perpetuity. At this point, the Linux Foundation is growing exponentially. Every day, there are new members joining, and there are 1,400 members from 41 countries. I believe it's now 35,000 developers and 190 or so open source projects. And if you were to kind of capture the value at any given moment in time, it would be about $16 billion in shared value. The reason why I share this with you is because LF Energy sits inside of an ecosystem. And it is, you know, it is an umbrella project that houses at this moment 6 projects, but probably in the next year to 2 to 3 to 4 years, we probably will grow into a larger, you know, perhaps anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 projects. And that as we become a healthy and vibrant ecosystem, those projects will enable the transformation of energy. So there are just a couple of projects that I want to point out, because I think that they show us where there is opportunity. In security, one of the things that the Linux Foundation does is through Let's Encrypt is that it encrypts 100 million SSL certificates on the planet. So basically ensures the privacy and security of the internet. That particular paradigm works because it's free. And if we move forward and all of the devices that are connected to the grid have to pay for a proprietary certificate in order to ensure security, we will create a bifurcated system in which there are some parts of the system, some parts of the grid that are secure, and a lot of the parts that are not secure. A better way to go, I would propose, is to actually use this model of Let's Encrypt and to come up with a common encryption and security and privacy paradigm and certificate that can be enabled for all devices. This project is actually managed by a couple of people, and they ensure the security of the entire internet. With LF networking began with a contribution of AT&T. They put in a project that became ONAP, and that in several years, they went from 9 to 180 different companies working together, and they represent 70% of the global network providers. I think that this is an unbelievably remarkable thing, that to accelerate 5G, 70%, 3.5 billion global mobile subscribers are receiving their telecommunication they're receiving their mobile services over open source housed at the Linux Foundation and worked on by 9 out of the 10 global projects that are really driving 5G. Cloud, 13 years ago, nobody had ever heard of cloud pretty much. And now you have something that's quite ubiquitous. And the reason why there's interoperability and the ability to have portable layers between clouds is that 100% of cloud infrastructure companies are working together in cloud native computing. When Dan Kahn talks about CNCF, and he talks about the first meeting in which 50 people were there, and now they have something like 12 or 8 or 12,000 people who go to their conferences. So this happened in just a couple of years. In automotive, 50% of the world's automakers, 50% of the world's autos that are going to be sold in 2020 will come with automotive grade Linux inside. That's another amazing story. Hyperledger, fastest growing blockchain project on the planet. And Node.js, that is the foundation for web, mobile, and serverless and IoT applications. And all of these projects are at the Linux Foundation, and I believe probably particularly important to energy going forward. So in its essence, what the Linux Foundation is, is a shared services group. And so the particular expertise that folks have, so there are about 200 people who work for LF, have world-class events, some of the best legal folks, IP and open source legal folks on the planet are in-house training. I think they've trained 800,000 developers just last year alone. And the training leads to certification. And the certification is critical and will become critical in energy systems, which is that not everyone in the world, just because you're a good developer, should be building mission critical and infrastructure. And so we need to have certification in order to ensure that those people who are building applications and implementing those applications really understand the nature both of digitalization and of power systems. Developer marketing, we have really one of the largest share of voice for any of the major foundations by orders of magnitude. And we have some of the best marketers on the planet. Developer operations, we host infrastructure and that allows for neutral environments for development and release management. And application security, we have a number of the world's foremost cybersecurity folks. And so we are able to do massive peer review, pen testing, bug bounties, and that security is critical and essential to the grid moving forward. So that's the context of, that LF Energy sits inside of the Linux Foundation. And I used to do my presentations where I would start off talking about LF Energy. But what I recognized was that people didn't really understand the context of, kind of why, what is the sort of history of projects at the LF, and how LF Energy as an umbrella project is going to be able to fundamentally provide a home for the digitalization of energy and for building the shared infrastructure that will allow us to accelerate the energy transition. Part of what we do is that we democratize state-of-the-art patterns so that these code parts are accessible for everyone. And if you look at the history of other projects, part of what happens with open source is that it commodifies hardware and it allows for climbing up the value chain. And in particular, for instance, what I was talking about with the long distance call, what happened with telecommunications is that we went from kind of point-to-point copper into a mobile model, and then into a software-defined network model, and then into a network functioned virtualization model. And in that kind of progression of technology evolution, at the foundations was open source. And what that then enabled was for the value proposition of telecommunications to increase incrementally, exponentially, not incrementally, like 3G and 4G, but just to exponentially be able to shift actually the value that is being provided. So the essence of, of a project at the LF is that, in energy, maybe 80% is proprietary and 20% is open source. But in the rest of the world, open source is maybe 80% of the starting point, and 20% is the secret sauce. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is we want to enable the open source initiatives that we are housing and that we will house to provide to utilities, to vendors, to consumers, a service energy that is faster, cheaper, and more secure. I just realized now that this slide didn't transfer over, but so we have a number of projects that we started with. And what I'll start with is talking about operator fabric, and then I'll kind of go through the pieces that are in the transmission and distribution space. About a year and a half ago, RTE, the French transmission system operator, came to me. They heard that I was saying, I think we need to move the whole marketplace to open source so that we can begin to accelerate value and innovation. And they made a decision to contribute to significant projects. And one of them is the platform that they use for control room coordination called Operator Fabric. And Operator Fabric is kind of like an iOS for the control room. One of the things that they saw happening in the control room was that people were looking at 12 screens, and they felt fundamentally that this was not sustainable. And so they built Operator Fabric. With all of the projects, there are videos that you can find on the website. And then if you go to the webinar channel, and Jeffro can give you that information at the very end, that you'll see what day Operator Fabric is going, when they will be actually providing a technical overview of Operator Fabric. The second project that they put in was something called Possible, which stands for Power System Blocks. And they are the planning, design, and simulation software that they use to actually manage the French grid. And that is, you know, from real-time, near-time to 5-10 years in advance. And so they have to, every year, put together their proposal of how they're going to scale the grid and what kind of resources and where they're going to make investments. And Possible is a series of 6 different projects that have been put together in something that they refer to as power system blocks. When I think about moving forward, where I see this Possible going is moving beyond just transmission to including distribution, and to including other forms of planning, design, and simulation, but using the framework of Possible and using kind of the notion of microservices in order to expand the footprints for integrated planning, design, and simulation. REAPS was a project of ARPA-E, and it was contributed by Vanderbilt University. And REAPS it's kind of an IoT platform for energy. You know, there are some similarities to other IoT platforms, but there are some very significant differences in terms of fault tolerance, capacity to network at the edge, real time, and other things that are related to the actual aspects of energy devices that is different than just an IoT device, a sensor. REAPS is basically a developer platform. And so there are a number of different applications that run on top of REAPS. One of them is a microgrid controller that was contributed by North Carolina State University. Another is a RAS, which is a curtailment application for wind that was donated by Washington State University, and a transactive energy application that was donated by Vanderbilt University. So it is a platform that allows for building scalable microservices for remote orchestration, distribution, and control. OpenEE Meter and EM2, which is the Energy Markets and Methods Consortium, is really a tremendous opportunity with regards to flexibility services and being able to define what a unit of value is. I wish I had actually the graphics, the right graphic here. Yes, the slides will be made available. That was a question. Oops. EM2 is actually a specification, and there are 3 different projects that sit inside of this. And so when EM2 actually does their webinar series, they will go into great depth in terms of talking about CalTrack, which is really what they've done is define what a unit of energy efficiency is equal to, and GRID, which gets at further levels of detail about non-wired solutions, and then SEAT, which is really related to privacy and how to manage data. Yesterday, I was on a call with a group of folks from the Green Button Alliance, and I think that tremendous work in the States was done in creating Green Button, but there are continued issues in terms of being able to know how to actually implement this within, in a manner that is secure and protects the privacy of consumers. I think that as we begin to figure that out, that we can begin to really automate those processes, which will go a great deal towards being able to rely on demand flexibility as a resource to the grid. And so I see this flexibility area as critical and important to sort of next generation digitalization. And then finally, we have the Open Energy Data Initiative, which is, in this case, it is one data lake that was contributed by NREL, but it also is a model for how we can scale data lakes and how to address data access, privacy and security, and data pain points. So not only will there be data in these data lakes, but there will also be code and algorithms that we can work with. And this project is just spinning up. And there are two additional projects that are coming. One we're actually starting to work on next week, which is around digital substations, and that is being driven by a consortium of members who are TSOs and DSOs in Europe. And that is around the digitalization and the virtualization of the substation and predictive maintenance. This is also an area of great interest. It's not just the sensors, but it's also being able to build and manage and work with the algorithms and the data that will allow for utilities to be able to ensure the safety of the systems that they're running. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. See this very much as the beginning, and that what needs to happen is, as we have started with these are our initial 23 members. What I see happening is that as we grow and as additional members come on, it will become clear what other sorts of projects we should be working on, and really beginning to build those things. And so whether it is big data, or whether it is AI, or whether it is automation, or it's virtualization, all of those projects are on the table. And it's really about, Monash University, for instance, very interested in transactive energy because they want to be able to do a campus to grid integration. And so that we'll begin working on that. You have, talking with some of the big box stores about doing a, commercial and industrial project that is looking at store to grid integration. One of our members has a vehicle to grid platform. So imagine seeing that in the future. In closing, I often show this picture of the General Sherman tree, which is in Sequoia National Park, and it is the largest living thing on Earth. It's also the fastest growing, and most people kind of say that it's around 25 to 2,600 years old. And I have a seed from General Sherman, and it's little. And when I think about how I talk to folks about LF Energy, is that, we're at the very beginning. Some people will say, oh, well, this is aspirational. And yes, it is aspirational. But if to truly create the future, you have to be able to create the space for something that's been not imagined before. And then you have to build the community around it. And ultimately, LF Energy is really around the collaboration and the community. And it is about nurturing the conditions that are going to allow us to transform the largest machine on the planet. So I think that it's a hero's journey that all of us need to take right now. And I often say to folks, you know, what I'm looking for is 10,000 developers to electrify the planet. And what I mean by that is I want to create, what we want to create with LF Energy is an unstoppable force. And that I invite you to join us and to know that we have to do this together. This is not going to, you know, I can't fix it. I can't make it. We have to do it together. And so I'm calling on all the better angels to jump in and figure out, these are the parts we're going to work on, and let's accelerate the energy transition. And the video didn't come on, but you can see the video somewhere else. And this is the information for myself and Mike. And I'm going to stop the share for a second, and I'm going to find the right slide because I also wanted to point you to some resources, okay? And this would be a good time to take questions, and maybe Jeffro, you can open that up, and I will see if I can find the right slide so you all can have access to that.
Yes, to ask questions, there should be a Q&A link. I noticed a few people have found it already. You can also add questions to the chat. And if you'd like to talk, there should be a way to, if you look under participants, you should be able to raise your hand, and I can let you speak. So one question is, if we're an open source developer, how do we join LF Energy? Shuli, do you want to field that, or should I?
Why don't you do it and I see if I can find this last slide.
Certainly. The best way to join LF Energy is to simply start participating. And the best way to do that is to, you can educate yourself through the website, and to participate directly, there's a number of active mailing lists at lists.lfenergy.org. If you click on subgroups when you get there, you will notice that there is a whole set of mailing lists. And this is really where the magic happens for each of the projects. Each project has an announcement list, a general discussion list, a list specifically for developers for that project, and then a technical steering committee list that's really just for the governance of that project. So that's really the best place to start. Each project is also in the midst of building out other resources. So some will have chat capabilities, for example, and each will eventually have its own website. Another question coming in: any details about how to get involved in the upcoming cybersecurity section? So that's a good question.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
So we are just beginning to bring together the folks that are interested in that. And I think that what we'll do is, as I kind of envision how we're going to move forward, I think there's going to be a mixture of projects and then kind of incubation and working groups. And so what I would like to see happen is, I'm very excited about Route 9B, and there have been a few other folks who have stepped up and said they're very interested in kind of the cybersecurity parts. And what I'd like to do is to start a working group that is sits underneath the governing board, and that really begins to develop a comprehensive sort of a framework for a process for how we can move forward and what parts we want to be investing in, and what's the best way to be doing that. Again, we will use the mailing list to communicate that to everyone. I think the most important thing for me to keep sharing over and over is we are so in the beginning of getting this going. And so if you have some great energy, why don't message me directly, and we can really begin to build that group. I'm not sure who asked that question. I'm curious.
I think that was Paul Watson.
Paul Watson. I don't know what Paul, what background in his.
It's with Climate Impact Capital.
Okay. So there were a couple of other questions that were, can you provide a copy?
So another question coming in is, how do government entities who might rely on results of energy efficiency measurement participate?
Great question. I would go to EM2. I would sign up on the mailing list. And then if you go to, there is a website for energy markets method. What's the URL? Do you remember what the URL is?
For EM2?
Yeah.
I believe it's energymarketmethods.org. Yes, energymarketmethods.org.
Yeah, Patricia. So if you go to energymarketsmethods.org, you can also get Bruce Mast's email. Bruce is heading up right now the consortium, and I believe that every single one of the meetings is listed publicly, and it would be just to jump in and start going to it, and that will end up eventually being how we will treat the cybersecurity piece and everything.
Okay. So I think we are.
Other questions? I wasn't able to find that slide, but I promise you that, where will we put the slide up?
The slides will be posted at lfenergy.org/webinars, and I posted the URL in the chat window.
Okay, and I will modify the deck that I have somewhere that actually has the video in it, and it has the right slide for kind of with all of the graphics in it, and it has information about what links to follow to find the mailing lists, and information around joining.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody had a question about whether there was a PDF available for joining.
Yes, I saw that. I will be in touch with Paul, the person who asked that, and
Okay.
I'm certainly able to answer any questions about joining. There's definitely nothing. It's all completely transparent. So I'd be able to send a copy of the agreement to anybody who wants it. Just get in touch with me directly. We had one more question about EM2, which is from Julie. It says, how is EM2 funded?
I don't think that it is funded at this point. I think it is, the folks from OpenEE Meter actually started it as a way of building stakeholder engagement. And so NASIO really, I think, drove the initial meetings and existed inside of NASIO, which is the National Association of State Energy Officials. And at this point right now, it is, an open stakeholder group, and that's the way it's funded, is through participation. Really, I think that you can also talk about that with the EM2 folks. But I'm curious what the question, where it comes from or?
It's from Julie Michaels. If you like, I can actually, I think I can open up your audio if you'd like to ask the question
Sure.
live. Actually, Shuli, I think you would need to do that.
Oh, I have to do that.
I was just trying to check, but I think that
I'm not sure how to do it.
on Julie's name, if you go to the far right under more, I think that one of the options is to open up audio. Maybe not. Sorry, folks. We're still
Okay.
sorting out our
We're still learning.
yes.
So, you know, all of the projects, and you know, Jeff, you can talk about this, but you know, all of the projects, people are funded usually by the company that they work with. So do members pay for management, for example, Bruce Mass role? So we are in discussions around that as to what part should actually be managed within the Linux Foundation and should come out of LF Energy, and what additional resources are necessary from a policy standpoint. And that is completely not, that's unknown territory at this moment in time. Other questions?
So feel free to raise hand.
So
or...
you all have my email. Please feel free to reach out to me, and would love to have you participate. And thank you very much for your attention and for, you know, showing up and listening and being a great audience.
Yes, indeed. Just to wrap up also, the audio or video and the slides for this will be available after, probably after the end of today, at lfenergy.org/webinars, and that's also a great place to look for the calendar for upcoming webinars. There are 6 more in this series that will be rolling out throughout the rest of the next month. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.